Hello, this is Nathaniel James, and this is the sixth installment of Philanthropy Geek Exchange, where we'll be talking to effective innovators in the field of philanthropy. Today we're joined by Shannon Farley of Fast Forward in the Bay Area. And Shannon, hello. Introduce yourself and tell us what Fast Forward is.
Hi, I'm Shannon Farley. I'm a co-founder of Fast Forward. Fast Forward is the first accelerator exclusively for tech nonprofits. We started early this year and our companies arrived this summer. We're working with 5 tech-driven nonprofits that are using products to improve the world's access to health, human rights, social services, and even financial literacy. Yeah.
Great. So we live in a world where nonprofits are working really hard to adopt appropriate technology for their mission, but that sounds a little bit different than your idea of a tech nonprofit or a tech-centric nonprofit. So dive into that distinction a little bit, and is there any particular technology that you think is a common definer of the groups that you support?
Yeah, we think technology is really important for all nonprofits, but we were interested in working with organizations that were really tech product companies that were using a nonprofit tax status so they could serve clients that, but for their tax status, wouldn't be able to afford their product. So we're working with a group like Medic Mobile that's connecting community health workers to the 1 billion people in the world who will never see a doctor in their lives. And we're working with groups like 1 Degree, that's a discovery platform for those in the Bay Area who access social services to find what services meet their needs. They're really leveraging tech not just as an overlay of their social mission, but as the path to their social mission.
Are mobile platforms a common denominator for your investees, grantees? How do you talk about?
We call them our cohort.
Partners?
They're all of the above. We invest both financial and human capital in their development over the course of the 13 weeks of our accelerator. And yes, they're all leveraging mobile. As technology costs have dropped, the capacity to use mobile to really shift the world in as far as social good is concerned is huge. And my time at Spark, I used to run Spark, which is a network for millennial philanthropists where we give exclusively to women's organizations around the world. I found over the 7 years, initially we were giving to social services groups primarily, scholarship funds, community gardens, organizing training, and in that time, by the time I left, almost all of the groups we were working with were using mobile as their primary means to access their constituents.
What do you think is the most exciting piece about mobile coming into the social impact and social change space?
That it's accessible. You know, I'm a feminist activist by trade, right? Like that's how I started my career, and I see that mobile is the single greatest tool for the empowerment of women since the pill. In places where there are no doctors, mobile is connecting women to healthcare. In places where women can't open bank accounts, they're using mobile to create financial hubs. It's providing a whole umbrella of social services that were previously inaccessible to women. And I think that's really exciting. And when we look at the companies in our cohort, you know, they're all working with customers who, but for their nonprofit status, wouldn't be able to afford them or access them. And we know that that means most of their customers are women and girls.
Great. So when we were introduced, you described yourself as being committed to disruption and philanthropy, which is really the heart of why I wanted to bring you on. So what are you focused on in disrupting philanthropy? What's your passion? What are your interventions, and what are you most excited about?
So with Fast Forward, one of the reasons I found the need for Fast Forward is because the companies in our cohort are having a very similar experience to what I had at Spark, in that in the very beginning we were able to access sort of fundraising from our friends and family, and then we were fortunate enough to win awards from sort of some key social entrepreneurship funders. And then we spent a lot of time figuring out how to bridge between those awards and major grants from huge foundations. That's where we spent maybe 60% of the ED's time and all of our volunteer and board time working on that. And that is true of all the companies in our cohort. They have been able to raise resources from friends and family. Many of them have started to win some awards, and they will, if they can bridge the capital pipeline, they'll be hugely successful, because the thing about tech is that it has zero marginal cost once you get to scale, right? But it costs them more to set up. So if you were running a soup kitchen, say, I could start it in my home and serve and grow incrementally. For these groups, they have to build before they can serve, and that costs resources. So the capital dynamic in philanthropy as it stands doesn't reward risk, right? We can only give to groups that have proven impact metrics. And our deal flow is 12 to 18 months. You can have a coffee meeting with a funder, and it will take you almost 2 years before you get your first test grant. And that kind of dynamic just won't work if we're going to see more tech nonprofits thrive.
So we're really talking about the role and experience of risk and trust in philanthropy. How do you see yourself and maybe others in the field who you think are filling this gap struggling with the way that the field defines things like trust and risk?
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot. I think with the professionalization of philanthropy, some good things happened, right? We became more efficient and more accountable, and we started looking at our real impact rather than giving money willy-nilly without a strategy or a vision in mind. But what's happened as a result is we've sort of gone to the other extreme, in which we've totally taken trust out of the virtuous cycle of giving. And as a result, we just don't take that many risks. Even risk-based philanthropists spend, up to 12 months with grantees before they write their first check. And as a result, we're sort of stifling ideation and stifling innovation within the field. And I feel that's really destructive. So I want to see more organizations taking risks, calculated risks. We should still interview everyone that you meet and do our due diligence. But yeah, I feel that there is deep distrust of the sector, both from those who are in the for-profit sector, but then more importantly from those of us who are in philanthropy.
What's interesting to me briefly is that the idea of trust is lumped in with things like soft skills and relationships and kind of like heart-driven components. But you're really talking about trust as an important strategic component of your work. And I don't know if you want to respond to that, but I think it's an important reframing of the ideas around trust and relationship.
Yeah, I mean, trust is critical to all human interaction, certainly, and it is a soft skill, but it's really important when you're doing this kind of early stage investment. You have to build relationships with those who are in your pipeline, understand how you can be a lever of support for them, and ultimately you need to trust their vision. And if you can't provide that space for them to do what they need to do, they won't be successful.
Great. So let's dive into something that's right there in your purpose statement, which is that you are serving efforts that address problems where there is no market solution. That's the phrase, no market solution. And you're in San Francisco, which is perhaps the epicenter for the movement of social enterprise, and there's a real gravity around the idea of driving market solutions for social problems. So can you talk to that dynamic between being a forward-looking, business-inspired or business strategy-oriented organization, and yet keeping your eyes solely focused on the nonprofit status, on those for which there may not be a profit motivation, even when they do get to scale?
Sure. Hey, look, I love social enterprises. I think social enterprise is a great innovation in the sort of social sector in the last decade. But nonprofit status is really just a tax status. So we encourage folks that we're talking to, either who haven't decided which way they're going to go yet or who are waffling between the two, you should choose whichever status makes the most sense for your business model. We chose to work with tech nonprofits because there are a lot of places that social enterprises can go to get this kind of support. You can go through regular accelerators, you can go through social enterprise specific accelerators, but really for tech nonprofits, there is a whole host of issues that you wouldn't get if you were in a regular for-profit accelerator. And they have most to do with the ways in which we run nonprofits. How one fundraises, how you organize your board, how you set up your legal protections that are just different. I also think that often people choose to go a social enterprise route rather than a nonprofit route because they think it will be easier to raise the startup capital. And they may be right, but it's always hard to raise money. And so I shudder when I hear people choosing a for-profit model when there is no real profit path. And I think that we're going to see more of those companies fail in the next few years, and it's going to be a problem for the sector as a whole. But for our companies, some of them could have been for-profits, but because of the customer they chose to serve, it made the most sense to go a nonprofit route. And one example is Nora Health. Nora Health is an aftercare tablet program that they use in hospitals in India and increasingly in the US. And what that means is after your loved one goes through surgery, normally you get like a binder of information on how to care for that person. This is something that you can read on your tablet or on your phone of how best to care for them. And if they were a for-profit social enterprise, they would still be working in health, but the most profitable part of that business would be serving like orthopedic surgeons. For these folks, they're interested in those who can least afford healthcare. So they want to work on folks who've just had heart surgery, folks who've just been through the emergency room, helping on wound care and basic cleanliness. So it's a different customer base, and therefore a different tax model is necessary.
Great. I think it's exciting because in some ways you're almost, maybe you wouldn't say this, but you're reclaiming the nonprofit, or you're reasserting the place of the nonprofit to fill market and government gaps in the 21st century. Can I ask you, does it make it challenging to build your own fund for your investments in a world where a lot of the gravity is going towards the idea of social enterprises and social impact investing?
You know, I have to say, it hasn't been. I think that we have our target donor market are technologists. We understood that they got how these entrepreneurs were going to run their companies, think about their products, and grow their global impact. And sort of tech philanthropist to tech nonprofit seemed like very like-minded exchange. And we've had sort of the opposite, I have to say, reaction than what I think some in our industry would have expected. The tech philanthropists have been incredibly generous with both their resources, their time, and their other fellow technologist friends, because they've been waiting to give back in a way that made sense with skills that they had and have developed over the years. And so I feel like this is a real opportunity, particularly in the Bay Area, as you mentioned, where the conversation around technology can be kind of toxic. Right? Like we see pictures in the news of people throwing eggs at Google buses because of what it's doing to our housing, and that's actually a far complicated policy that we are all considering as members of this community. And so creating a space in which people can give back meaningfully has been really powerful, both for the philanthropists, but then also for the companies to know that they are part of a larger tech community that really believes that technology has a power and a scale for good that is underutilized and with great potential.
Wonderful. So we're coming to the close. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to share with an audience of philanthropy professionals in particular?
Yeah, I think that thinking about the capital pipeline for nonprofits, that particularly for family foundations and smaller foundations that are looking to sort of make their mark in the world, I feel like tech philanthropy is an interesting place to go. The amount of money that is needed in the beginning to build a product company is different than it is to build other things. And if sort of newer foundations that are experiencing generational shifts on their board could see tech nonprofits as an opportunity to really make a critical angel investment before these groups scale, I think it's a powerful way to get small foundations really moving money in a way that'll make a big difference for a lot of people.
All right, and now for the last question that I've been asking everyone who's participating, how would you hope that philanthropy will be different in 25 years than it is today?
To echo part of our earlier conversation, I'm deeply concerned about the lack of trust in philanthropy at the moment. And I think there are things we need to do to put trust back into the virtuous cycle of giving. And some of that has to do around those of us who are philanthropists, both institutional and individual, sort of daylighting our processes for grantees and potential grantees. Like, I want the people who apply to know how long it will take between their first meeting and by the time I write a check. And I want my grantees to be able to rate their interactions with me and how well it worked for them or didn't work for them. I think a lot of philanthropy and fundraising to those who are running organizations feels a little bit like black magic. Like you just sort of walk into a room and maybe it happens and maybe it doesn't, and we know that's not true. And it feels like black magic because we're not being honest about how we make the decisions that we make. So I would like to see some of that daylighted. One of the things that happens in the for-profit tech space that's really powerful are things like AngelList and Hacker News that are exposing some of the practices of investors. And I think we need that in the nonprofit space desperately. It will make the market of philanthropy far more efficient, and it will add trust back into the cycle because we can see it. We show it to the people to whom we say we serve.
Great. Well, I think sometimes it might sound like a wild idea now, but let's see if we can pull it off in 25 years.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for taking the time, and look forward to seeing the future of Fast Forward. That's it. The URL is ffwd.org.
Yes, that's it.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thank you, Nathaniel.